You're standing in a forest, and for a moment, you feel like you don't belong there. The trees do not need you. The birds do not pause for you. The insects moving through the leaf litter have been running the same operation for longer than you can really comprehend. And you are, in this moment, simply a visitor to a system that was fully alive and fully complete long before your species ever opened its eyes for the first time. Most people never sit with that feeling for more than a second before moving on with their day. But that flicker of smallness is worth staying with, because it is pointing at something true. Earth was not waiting for us. It ran for billions of years without a single human witness, and understanding what it was like during that time changes the way you see the ground beneath your feet. To understand Earth before humans, you have to first accept how late we actually arrive in the story. If the entire 4.5 billion year history of the planet were compressed into a single 24-hour clock, humans do not show up until the final few seconds before midnight. For almost the entire day, there is no one watching, no one naming the mountains, no one recording the storms. And yet the planet was not empty or static during that time. It was extraordinarily active, violently creative, and populated by forms of life so strange that if you saw them today, you would not know what category to put them in. Let's go back to the very beginning. Answer 1 is a planet with no life at all, a world of fire and impact. Early Earth, geologists tell us, was a molten surface bombarded constantly by asteroids and debris left over from the formation of the solar system. One of those impacts, according to the leading hypothesis studied by researchers like Robin Canup, was so massive that it knocked a piece of Earth into orbit, and that piece became the moon. There was no blue sky yet, no breathable air, nothing that resembled the world, you know. The atmosphere was mostly carbon dioxide and volcanic gas, closer to the surface of Venus than to Earth as you understand it today. Answer 2 takes us to the moment everything changed, the arrival of life itself, and it did not arrive the way you might picture it. The earliest organisms were not plants or animals, but microbes, simple, single-celled life forms that appeared in the oceans roughly 3.8 billion years ago. For nearly 2 billion years, this was the entire story of life on Earth. Not a single visible creature, not a blade of grass. Just microscopic organisms multiplying quietly in ancient seas, doing something that would eventually make every later form of life possible: photosynthesis. A group of these organisms, cyanobacteria, began releasing oxygen as a byproduct of converting sunlight into energy, and this slow release, over hundreds of millions of years, is what scientists call the Great Oxidation Event. It was, in a sense, the planet's first true transformation, driven entirely by the smallest life forms imaginable, and it poisoned much of the existing microbial life that could not tolerate oxygen, while opening the door for everything that came after. Answer 3 is the part of Earth's history that tends to capture the imagination the most: the age of enormous, unfamiliar creatures. Long before dinosaurs, the oceans were dominated by strange armored arthropods, sea scorpions the size of a grown man, and creatures called anomalocaris that behaved like nothing alive today. This period, the Cambrian, saw what paleontologists refer to as an explosion of biological diversity, a relatively rapid appearance of nearly every major body plan that exists in animals today. Later, roughly 240 million years ago, dinosaurs began their reign, and it lasted an almost unthinkable length of time. Consider this. The gap between the last Tyrannosaurus rex and the first human being is longer than the gap between that same Tyrannosaurus rex and the Stegosaurus. Time on this scale does not behave the way your daily life leads you to expect. Entire eras rise and vanish, and the planet simply continues. Answer 4 is the part of the story most people never learn. Earth has already ended the world several times before we arrive to see it happen. Paleontologists count 5 major mass extinction events prior to human existence, the most devastating being the Permian extinction roughly 250 million years ago, sometimes called the Great Dying, in which an estimated 90% of marine species and a majority of land species vanished, likely driven by massive volcanic activity in what is now Siberia. The most famous of these events, the extinction that ended the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, was caused by an asteroid impact near what is now the coast of Mexico, a single afternoon that rewrote the entire trajectory of life on Earth. What is remarkable is not simply that these extinctions happened, but that life recovered every single time, reorganizing itself into new forms, filling the empty spaces left behind. The planet does not require any particular species to continue. It only requires life to continue in whatever shape survives. And this is where the story quietly turns toward you. After the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs, small mammals that had been living in the shadows for tens of millions of years finally had room to grow, diversify, and eventually, after an almost unimaginable chain of small evolutionary steps, produce a lineage of primates, then hominids, then, extremely recently, something that could ask the question you are asking right now. Homo sapiens have existed for roughly 300,000 years, compared to the 3.8 billion years life has existed on this planet. That number is so small it barely qualifies as a fraction. We are not the main event of Earth's story. We are closer to a final chapter, arriving after an almost incomprehensible amount of history had already played out without us. There's something quietly steadying in that fact, rather than something diminishing. You are not separate from this history. You're made of it. The calcium in your bones and the iron in your blood were forged inside stars that died long before the solar system existed. The oxygen you just breathed exists because of microbes that lived billions of years before the first eye ever opened. Every walk through a forest, every glance at a mountain range, every step across ground that has been rearranged by ice ages, oceans, and asteroid strikes is a step across a record that includes you not as an outsider, but as its most recent inheritor. So the next time you feel small standing in a landscape that does not seem to notice you, you can let that feeling settle instead of brushing past it. You are standing on a planet that ran a full, complicated, endlessly creative existence long before anyone was here to admire it, and it did all of that quietly, correctly, without needing an audience. You arrived late to a story that had already survived fire, ice, and extinction 5 times over, and somehow, against every conceivable odd, that story found a way to include you in it.